We're treating this pattern piece like an X and Y graph, with this being 0. And we've offset all of our lines that are vertical. Now we're going to offset our lines that are horizontal or parallel to the grain. So my first one is the width of my neck, and because I chose 3.5, I'm going to come out 3 up here. So we're back in offset again. Select the line to offset, and I'm switching to value, and it's -3, so I guess it's not like your typical X and Y graph. I mean, it's similar, but because the computer is putting all of the things that go inside the pattern piece as a negative. Okay, I won't give you a headache. And then I want my shoulder, and I want my shoulder to be 4.5 inches wide. So I'm going to use this line, and I'm going to move that another 4.5 inches. So that gives me my armhole space and my side seam. And I'm going to come up here a little bit. So I'm going to do another one that just comes up here 1 inch from the bottom. And this is also negative because it's going inside. Okay. Now I'm going to put in all of my straight lines. So if you're looking at your pattern piece, your straight lines are your shoulder and your side seam. And my shoulder is going to go from the high point of shoulder to this line that I made for the width of my shoulder and for my shoulder drop. And that's on the other video. So I'm going to create a line that's just a straight 2-point line. I'm going to highlight this line and then release when I get to the top. And this one I'm going to have to zoom in on so I can see it. And I want it to end up right there. But I'm going to highlight the line and move it over until it's right on top, and then release. So that's my shoulder. And the bottom of my armhole was this line. So I'm going to start here and put my side seam of my shirt, and it's going to look a little weird, but it won't when I'm finished. So there's my armpit. There's my waist. Then I want to take hold of that same line and attach to it. And that line might be a little bit high, so I'm just going to kind of come between the two for where my hem goes. That does look a little weird. Okay, I'm going to undo that. And I'm also going to delete that last line I added. And I'll go back and create another line that connects to this one and just comes down to the bottom and ends in the corner. Okay. Your t-shirt might turn out much different looking than this. That's why we all chose our favorite one to copy. Okay, so now that I've got my side seams and my shoulder, I need to make my right angles so everything turns out nice and balanced and smooth. And I'm going to choose perpendicular on line. Create, line, drop down box under 2-point, perpendicular on line. So any line that I make with this is going to be perpendicular from the line I touch first. So I'm going to touch, hold, slide, highlight, release right there. And I'm going to pull that line down just as a guideline, and on the rest of them I'm only going to use a half a line. So that's a guideline. I'm not going to use the whole thing, but it's getting me started toward my neck area. And I'm going to touch, hold, slide, highlight, and go to the end of that line and release and pull it out a little bit. And I'm going to come off of my side seam coming back, and I want to put my hem, I don't want my hem, I want a right angle on the end of it, so I'm just starting my line right there, and that's just a guideline. You want this corner to be a right angle so that it looks nice and smooth as it goes around the body and not pointy. So I'm going to come back to create line 2 point again and come into curves. And if you're not caught up with me, just pause and replay that last part. Now I'm in 2 point curves, and I'm going to start on the line about right here for my armhole. And I want to highlight this line and come out about the point it's going to start curving, but I'm going to leave it straight at a right angle for a little bit. Now here's where I choose my armhole. I don't want that line to overlap either of the other two, but I want it fairly tight. So I like that. I'm just going to set it down. And my neckline, I want my front neck to be straight for just a little bit, and then I want it to blend in up here, so I'm going to highlight this line. And this is a guess. If you don't like it, just undo it and try it again until you get this right. That's why we're making the t-shirt. It's going to be nice to have a t-shirt, but we're really learning how to use lines and combine them. So practice this until you get line shapes that you like. Okay, and the last one, I don't want my side seam to be skin tight, so I'm going to join these two, and then I'm going to come in and just give it a soft angle, and this will be a little bit bigger than it needs to be. And I'll join this one right here and just blend my hemline. There. So that's the outline of my front t-shirt, including the neck, and my back t-shirt as soon as I put my neckline in. And because I have a right angle there, I know those are going to match. If I wanted that to be a little bit different, then I would need to line it up a different way. So we put in our horizontal lines and added our curves. Now I'm going to trace off the shirt. So select the perimeter lines to trace. Trace clockwise in an order, and I'm just going to touch the first part of that line and the second stage, and where I'm touching the line matters. I don't want to touch it down here. I want to touch the next part that I'm going to use. Clockwise in an order, and if you touch the wrong line, just retouch it and touch the correct one. Then I want this part of that line and that part of this straight line. So I'm not grabbing them where I don't want them. I'm touching the segment of the line that I need. Alright, so that perimeter should be closed if I was careful. If you didn't touch, slide, highlight, and release right on the lines, the water's going to run out of your piece and it's going to give you an error message. So I'm going to copy my grain line and say OK, and there's my piece. So T-shirt 1 map. It's a great name for it, so I'm going to say OK for that. I'm going to say that again. Some of you didn't have a piece that closed right, and it gave you an annoying error message, but you just have to remain calm and make sure that you trace the piece off clockwise in an order. And if you remember putting in these curves if you weren't touching the line when you released, or instead of adding your line and curve by creating a 2-point line by starting on this line and coming up to the end and connecting onto this line and coming up and lining up on it, if you're not careful about your connections, that's where your water's going to leak out. So if you used this line instead and then you didn't grab the end of it so all of the pieces were touching, you're going to have a problem. And right here, I wasn't careful about being smooth, so I think I'm going to fix that while I'm looking at it. I'm going to put in a different 2-point curve that starts there. And I might just blend it into that line. Yeah, that looks fine. Okay, so I've got my front. Oh, no, this was the map. See, that wasn't a good name for the piece. So I'm going to change my mind and say File, Save As. So I'm going to choose that. Instead of map, I'm going to save it as T-shirt 1 front. And when I get into my file, I will just delete the other one. Now it's my front. To clean this up before I do my next piece, I want all of these line segments to just have as many endpoints as they need. So this is a line, the neck needs to be all one line. So I'm going to go into Modify, Combine, and I'm going to combine this little line with the rest of the neck. Say OK. And this one. This is the extended truing and balancing that you need to do on the computer to keep your pieces clean. So I combined all of my line segments into full lines so that I don't get any error messages later, and I'm going to save that. I also need to label it, but I know you're excited for me to trace off the back, so I will. Create piece trace, and I'm going to start with the center, the beginning of the back line, the next stage, and then I want to use that little piece, and I'm going to zoom in and touch this part of the line, always clockwise and in order. And touching the part of the segment that you need. Okay, so there it is. And this one's going to be T1 back. And OK. So I've got my map that I want to put in my model, my front that I want to put in my model. My back is going to match exactly because I made it that way. And I need to merge those lines again. Oh, combine. Modify, line, combine. This all needs to be one. Right click and say OK. I missed one. You don't want to turn the whole piece into a line, just each segment is one line. If you start going around the corners, that will give you trouble later. Okay, so those look nice. Work on them. If you need to go for a walk and come back to it and start over, then do that. Sometimes I go get a drink of water and come back. Okay, so I'm going to create my annotation, and this is mine, and it's my T-shirt front. cut one on fold. Well, that's not how you spell cut. Cut one. .25 is your text size. And there it is. So I'm going to go up to Edit now, Annotation, say OK, and copy, and put it on this one. And instead of front, this is my map. Say OK, and copy, and this is my back. And apply and OK. And if I had said apply and then copy, I wouldn't have had to go back into it. So it's ready. When you're through with that, I anticipate that this is going to take you a class period or two. When you're through, you can add seam allowance, but you can save that for another day. So we're going to go up and put the pieces in the model, create, edit model, add pieces, and whatever you have finished, you can add to it and then come back when you need to. So this is mine. T-shirt 1. And choose the pieces that go in the model. And there they are. And eventually we'll get that ready to plot.